From the moment Jill Soloway's television Transparent debuted on Amazon in 2014, it was clear that this person had something new, something fresh, and something very urgent and vital to say. Soloway, who had directed films and written for television for years, was inspired to create the show when their parent came out as trans. That show would become a phenomenon, bringing the lives of trans people into the world's living rooms as never before. It wasn't long before Soloway was declaring, at the Emmys no less, their ambition to topple the patriarchy. Now, with a production company aptly named Topple, and a new book, She Wants It, about female ambition and so much more, Soloway is poised to do just that. Please welcome to the build stage my friend, Jill Soloway.
Thanks, Lydia.
So let's get some sort of breaking news out of the way. A lot of people want to know what's next with Transparent. You've got the final season coming up, and you've got something very special planned to go out with a bang.
Yes, breaking news. So rather than a full season, we're going to do a movie, and that movie is going to be a musical. A grand finale, season finale musical.
And anyone who watches the show, loves the show, knows that music has been a really important part of the show, and musical theater, in fact, has been an important part of the show. Why is that?
Well, our family has really been involved in musical theater since we were little kids, and my sister Faith Soloway is a brilliant lyricist and composer and musician, and she's been writing songs about our family and about the Pfeffermans for nigh on our entire lives. And so we've actually kind of had this musical in the works, and we're hoping one day when Transparent ended to make our way to Broadway. And so in the meantime, we're taking this opportunity to do our last season and have people singing and dancing and really transitioning with the show.
And of course, speaking of transitions in the show, obviously you're moving into a post-Morris storyline. Jeffrey Tambor is no longer on the show. Is there anything you can tell us about how you plan to deal with that?
Well, I think the musical is going to answer that question. We want to leave some things for when we put it out. But, I think the question of a cis man playing a trans woman was always a little bit problematic on our show. And so we are addressing that in a really creative way in the musical.
That is going to be really exciting to see and look
That's
forward
my hint.
So let's talk about this book. Who's the she and She Wants It?
Oh, Lydia, great question. Because at some point I was like, do I need to rename it They Want It or She Wanted It, since I don't use the she pronouns
so let's
anymore.
You came out as non-binary.
Yes.
And that I think is a really integral part of the book. But so who is the she if it's not necessarily you?
Yeah, well, the non-binary thing is a way of being kind of neither male nor female and kind of both and kind of either all the time, constantly changing at any minute. As I tell people, it's like, it's Pat, but not sad. That's a really quick way of having people understand it.
Well, and unlike Pat, you don't have to constantly ask the question because it kind of doesn't matter, right?
Right, exactly.
That's not the core thing. I mean,
Yeah.
the punchline of Pat was always, wait, is Pat a man or a woman?
Right. The answer is both and neither, and either constantly changing at all times.
And who cares?
And who cares anyway? Yeah. Exactly. And and think about what you think of me if you don't know, and I think a willingness to be in that position, which is a little bit of a kind of vulnerable sacrifice position, of like, okay, I'm in a place where I'm not trying to let people know gender me female, gender me male. I'm actually enjoying the feeling of being in the center and hoping that people don't get too annoyed and, in fact, enjoy their own thought exercise of realizing what if Jill was neither.
Well, and I think that's one of the really revolutionary things at the core of this book, and it says things that I think I haven't really seen expressed before. About the problematic nature of the gender binary and how that influences consent, which is really at the heart of the book. So do a quick primer for us.
Okay, I will.
On consent.
I'll explain why I called it She Wants It is because as I was trying to come up with a name, I looked back through my life and realized that when I was in my early 20s, I had written a documentary proposal called She Wants It. I was really thinking a lot about gender and consent way back then. And I think it wasn't until after my parent came out as trans and I started to really be able to see my own gender, I think by kind of walking away from femaleness and femininity, that I realized that when I was heterosexual and female and femme and feminine, consenting was confusing even for me. because what we do as women and girls and what we're trained to do as women and girls is make space for men's reality. So I feel like you're really in danger of not being believed if you're female in patriarchy.
That doesn't sound familiar at all, because
Yeah.
didn't we just sit through a bunch of hearings for a Supreme Court justice that turned on this very question?
Yeah, and in fact, people say, like, why are you always using the word patriarchy? What does it mean? It simply means a male-created world created by men, mostly to protect men. That's it. And I think a lot about how men corroborate and collaborate on one another's realities. So if two men are pointing at a woman and saying she wants it or she wanted it, it's an insult, and it's actually something that can spur them to sexual violence. It's a conversation between two men, turning a woman into an object who's not allowed to have her own desire or capable of her own desire. It's completely taking away her subjectivity. And then I think about, as a director, as a writer, where I'm trying to inspire women to want things. You get to want to choose the backdrop, the set, the actors, the lens. Directing, writing, it's about wanting, desire, desire, desire. But how can women connect to their desire when we're punished for having desire? And in fact, in all these questions about consent, the only women who are actually protected legally are those who immediately said, no, I didn't want it, I didn't want to be there, and I tried to tell them right away no. There are a lot more like gray cases where women may consent to the first step, but not the second and not the third. But at the moment a woman admits desire at all, and even admits a little bit of consent, she's really no longer protected by the law.
Well, and I think that's one of the really striking things in the book, is this notion that consent is actually continual. It's not a one-time thing that happens at a moment, and if you say yes, it's
All bets are off.
All bets are off.
Right. Well, they are in the eyes of the law. I remember back in my first book, I wrote a lot about the Kobe Bryant case, and at that time nobody was talking about this. But this question of, did she want him to come up to her room? Well, what if she did? I mean, what if she even maybe wanted to kiss him? We don't know, because you're not, as a woman, you're not even you're not even allowed to say, yeah, I even actually wanted some part of this romance to happen, or this even sex to happen, but I didn't want the other part. Once you say yes to any of it, it's over for you as a woman. And so, yes, the law and our culture treats consent as if it happens in a snapshot. You can take a picture of it. She said yes, so she wants it. But in truth, consent is actually a spiritual, moral, ethical connection that continues to ask the question of two partners over and over again, no matter what their gender. You okay? You still want to be here? Having fun? Liking this? Loving this? Checking in?
Yeah.
Normal things that people should want from the person they're having sex with.
Yeah. Well, and it goes way beyond sex, right? I mean, like, I think about the way that you write about ambition and how you felt as a person with ambition. And you write very honestly about professional jealousy, about wanting things that you weren't getting. I mean, you had a long career in Hollywood before you had your big breakout moment, doing a lot of really amazing things. Why is it that ambition in women is so problematic?
Well, we have to stand on this tiny little square inch of real estate to be able to have any access to power in patriarchy. So, I call it the divided feminine. Men are cool with you if you're their mother or their daughter or their sister or related to them, somehow part of their financial, moral property. But if you're not, if you're over here, then, you're it's up for debate as to whether or not you get their protection. So, for me, I think I just realized how careful I had to be all the time when I identified as female and straight. I think I was thinking a lot about being thought of as cute, being thought of as nice, kind, good girl. Like, I really wanted to be like adorable Jill, that anybody would say, oh, she's so much fun to have around. She's adorable and she's easygoing and she's cute, but, not too sexy. Like, I was really walking that tightrope, I think, for multiple years. And ambition absolutely is not a comfortable part of that tightrope. You can't really admit to ambition.
How do you feel about it now?
Now, well, that's been one of the greatest things about this non-binary thing, is that I don't think of myself as an ambitious woman. I don't compare my traits to my gender anymore. So I feel like I can be as ambitious as I need to be.
So there's a liberation in
For sure.
In pulling out of that. You were involved kind of at ground zero in the Time's Up movement, MeToo. You started your own movement, 50-50 by 2020. How is that going a year out?
Yeah, it's going amazingly. So 50-50 by 2020 is actually a strategic initiative of Time's Up. Time's Up has multiple spokes within Time's Up Entertainment, and one of the things that we're doing is speaking specifically about intersectionality and culture making. We're saying that the people who make the stuff that Hollywood shows to the world tell people on the whole planet how they feel about themselves. And so that's why women, people of color, queer people, trans people, disabled people, and other otherized people need more access to not only directing and writing, but also the rooms where you decide who gets a TV show, who gets a movie, who gets an overall deal. So it's been really exciting, and a year later, it's unbelievable to see how galvanized all of the women and non-binary folk involved in Time's Up, how everybody's been gathering together and doing stuff behind the scenes and connected with each other about what are we doing now, what do we want next, and really taking steps. Of course, we're all gearing up for the election coming up and, waiting to see the world turn out or the country turn out in a way that stands up for what we know is right for women.
I mean, it's hard because we've seen all of these figures fall in entertainment, in business, in so many spheres of life. The one place where figures are not falling are in conservative politics, it seems. I mean, I would say politics in general, but there are Democrats like Al Franken who lost their careers as a result of it. It kind of feels like the final frontier and the one place, the kind of accountability-free zone.
Yeah, well, I think that liberals and people who are more tolerant are willing to investigate themselves, and that's why I think some people call it the left eating itself. Whereas I think if you're on the right and if you're from a red state, that kind of feeling of like power and walls and do not cross here is actually part of the personality of the conservative movement. Just kind of blocking. And so liberals as people are more interested in tolerance and more interested in trying to understand the other side, which is, I think, why we are finding ourselves interrogating our own leadership, and that somebody like Al Franken would not only be criticized, like on the right, it's not the personality of the right to take down people within the movement because they're not interrogating themselves in the way that we are. So, for Al Franken to not only be accused, but also for Al Franken to say, okay, I'm going to step off, is a very tolerant liberal thing to do.
And I mean, of course, you faced this yourself with the allegations against Jeffrey Tambor and having, this show was your baby, still is, and you write really movingly in the book about how Jeffrey brought Maura to life, and yet you've also had to grapple with the allegations against him, the safety and well-being of your staff, and it must be an extraordinary experience, kind of close up, of having to muddle your way through this kind of situation.
Yeah, muddle is a really good word, and I think it was really difficult for me because I was used to speaking for the feminist community, and still am really getting used to speaking for the trans and non-binary community. And so, because the women who accused Jeffrey were trans, I feel like it was really a painful time for them to not be more publicly supported by all of us as well as the cast and crew. I think there was, the legal stuff, which was like sort of stay low, keep your head down, nobody say anything until we've gone through the processes. Some of the things that kind of first happen when men are accused, that really everybody around the situation is told, like, say nothing. But there are people who really need support, the victims and the people who are coming out and sacrificing their safety by speaking. And that was really painful. That was a really painful time for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that both Trace and Van had the courage to come out and speak. And, both of them know that I'm grateful for their bravery. And, that's really part of the process of being a feminist, is recognizing that, it's true. It's, the people who are willing to speak, the people who are willing to take that bravery moment and kind of sacrifice themselves for the movement are really the heroes.
Yeah. So your company is called Topple, and that's a reference to topple the patriarchy.
That patriarchy toppling that I'm always talking about.
So, Transparent is coming to an end. You have a new book out. What are your ambitions for Topple? What would you like it to be doing and creating in the world as you move into this next phase?
Whenever anybody will listen, I'm always talking about an intersectional power movement. So 5050by2020.com, which is our strategic initiative, is really saying this thing: women, people of color, queer people, otherized people are actually the majority on the planet. We're the majority. And yet we don't have a singular narrative of the way power is used against us. So people talk about white supremacy, they talk about patriarchy, but nobody's really knitting together yet the ways that Ta-Nehisi Coates will talk about, a hoodie being similar to the short skirt in terms of the way people say they deserved it. And so what I'm hoping is that, through the next few years, that people who are otherized will begin to come up with a common narrative so that we can fight back against power with a message of truth and love and tolerance. And so Topple just hopes to create that kind of content, work by women, work by people of color, women of color, queer people, whether it's books, movies, TV shows, and just offering access to protagonism.
What are the sort of cultural spaces that you're most excited about right now? I mean, obviously you've been working in television over the run of Transparent. What's emerging out there that you're thinking, I really want to tell stories in that format?
Well, I think movement building is storytelling, and I think a lot about movement building, and I wonder, what would it be like to build a movement the same way we make TV shows and movies and books? Again, telling this story that on the left, this quality of tolerance and love is powerful, and that it's power that we want for things like peace, for things like allowing feminine leadership to actually not just be tolerated but asked for. That what would it be like if straight cis men were saying, we want women in power, I want a woman boss, I like the way women lead. These are the kinds of things we're really wanting, not to be considered as equal, but to be admired for the ways that we can bring an understanding to the world, and an understanding to business and to politics, and not just be constantly fighting to be heard.
What are you hoping for in the midterms? I mean, obviously, this is a big moment for the country. I think a lot of folks are bracing for elation or a feeling like last November 2016. What are your hopes?
I guess, again, thinking about this story, what is it that people can say about the left that will really transform and change people? I think for me, the fear of any kind of Trump success is, I think what a lot of liberal people are feeling is, when we watch Trump speak at these rallies, we get this sense of this kind of fascism, this feeling of laughing at the weak, of gathering a group of people together to humiliate and to just kind of worship power in this way that I think is really frightening. My hope is that people can start to see through the ways that Trump offers power by otherizing. I know it sounds kind of academic, but it really is true. It's sort of like, we're the best, we are the champions. That's not going to age well as a way for our country to feel about ourselves. I think our country does better when we feel like we're leading with ideas about not only intersectionality, but solidarity around the idea of love and tolerance.
Well, and it's interesting, there's a writer, Adam Serwer, who writes for The Atlantic, who wrote a piece about the Trump rally saying that, and the headline was, "The cruelty is the point." And he made a point that really was echoed, what Christine Blasey Ford said in her testimony, which is that these two friends were laughing and having fun with each other, as if, and the object of their fun was her, right. and that there is a kind of cruelty in that, and thinking about ways to get us to a world where that's not how people bond with one another, over cruelty, but rather over solidarity. That's an ambitious life program.
Yeah, well, I feel like if we're not thinking about that, what's the point? We have to be able to be thinking about these big questions. How to save the world, how to make a better place. And to me, sometimes pointing out these simple things, like that feeling, of humiliation that's happening with Trump at a rally speaking to a huge stadium full of people making fun of Christine Blasey Ford is the same feeling that was happening with those two boys in the room. It is the same feeling that patriarchy offers to men to corroborate one another's reality. Let's make fun of her together. And she wants it as a way that, women get otherized by two men whispering. So, for me, it's about how can we take some of these concepts that could feel a little academic, a little political, and make them feel so simple that they start to, cross parties.
Well, your book is, I think, a welcome contribution to a growing shelf of really great books on feminist, humanist topics. I'm sure you've read a lot of them. Rebecca
Yes.
Traister, they're all.
She's out and about right now with her book tour, and I'm so glad that we're doing this at the same time.
Exactly. So there's a lot of conversation happening. I'm going to see if there are any questions from the audience.
Hello. So I was wondering, as somebody who has been, dealing with and informing people
Okay, the book is She Wants It. Our guest is Jill Soloway. Buy it, read it, watch their
Oh my God, thanks, Lydia.
watch their amazing show.
It's hard, right?
It's
you did
it's hard. even for us queers, it's hard.
It's hard.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.